The first time she saw him cry, it wasn't quiet. It wasn't the kind of pain people hide behind closed doors. It was raw, ugly, and breaking apart right there in the middle of an ordinary kitchen flooded with sunlight. His hands trembled, his breath uneven, like something inside him had finally snapped after holding on for far too long. And somehow, in that moment, she didn't look away. If you believe in kindness, in humanity, in second chances, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because some stories aren't just stories, they're reminders of who we can still choose to be. Her name was Meher, and no one ever noticed her when she walked into a room. Not really. She wasn't loud, she wasn't demanding, and life had already taught her how to fold herself into smaller spaces just to avoid being seen. But the truth was, she carried more strength in her silence than most people ever would in a lifetime. She had learned early that love could humiliate you, that it could strip you down, make you feel disposable, replaceable, like you were never enough to begin with. The kind of lessons that don't just hurt for a moment, they settle into your bones, shaping the way you breathe, the way you trust, the way you exist. That morning, the sunlight poured through the kitchen window like any other day. Dust particles floated gently in the air, and everything looked deceptively calm. But nothing about that space felt calm. The air was heavy, suffocating. Armand stood there, leaning against the counter, his face crumbling under the weight of something too big to carry anymore. His eyes were red, swollen. His voice caught somewhere between breaking and disappearing altogether. He had just been left. Not the quiet kind of leaving, but the kind that tears through everything you believed in. Promises shattered, years erased, a future gone in a single moment. Meher hadn't planned to be there. She wasn't supposed to be part of his story. But sometimes, life doesn't ask for permission before rewriting everything. She watched him carefully, not with pity, but with understanding, because she recognized that kind of pain, the kind that doesn't scream, but suffocates slowly. And for a moment, she hesitated, because stepping closer meant risking something she had spent years protecting. Her heart. But then, she did something no one else had done for him. She stayed. No questions, no judgment, no attempt to fix him, just presence. And strangely, that presence felt louder than anything else in that room. Days passed, then weeks. She didn't try to become his savior. She didn't rush into his broken world with grand gestures or promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she did something far more powerful. She showed up, in small ways. A cup of coffee left quietly on the counter. A soft, "Are you okay?" that didn't demand an answer. A silence that didn't feel empty. And slowly, painfully slowly, something inside him began to shift. Not because she healed him, but because she never made him feel like he needed to hide his broken pieces. But life doesn't change overnight. There were still moments when the past clawed its way back in. Nights when his breathing grew heavy again, when doubt returned, like a storm he couldn't escape. And in those moments, Meher never tried to silence the storm. She stood beside it, because she knew what it felt like, to fight battles no one could see. There were days when her own past whispered back at her, reminding her of every time she had been told she wasn't enough, every moment she had been overlooked, replaced, forgotten. And yet, she chose kindness anyway. Not because it was easy, but because she knew what it felt like to need it. And maybe, just maybe, she hoped that if she gave it freely, it might finally find its way back to her. One afternoon, everything changed. The sunlight was brighter that day, almost blinding, the kind of light that exposes everything you try to hide. Armin stood there again, in the same kitchen. But something was different. He wasn't crying, not yet. But his hands were clenched, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with something deeper than sadness. "I don't deserve this," his silence seemed to scream. "I gave everything, and it still wasn't enough." And for the first time, Meher stepped closer. Not quietly this time, not gently, but with something stronger. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for once, she didn't hold back. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from softness. Sometimes it comes from truth. And in that moment, without saying a word, she made him realize something he had never allowed himself to believe, that his worth was never tied to the person who left. That love doesn't define your value. That being broken doesn't mean being unworthy. And something inside him finally cracked open, not in pain, but in realization. He had spent so long chasing validation from the wrong place that he forgot what it felt like to be seen for who he truly was. And somehow, Meher had seen him from the very beginning. Not his pain, not his failure, not his past, just him. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he had to prove anything. Days turned into something lighter. Conversations became easier. Laughter returned slowly, like a forgotten melody finding its way back. But Meher, she remained the same. Quiet, steady, strong. Because her love wasn't loud. It wasn't overwhelming. It didn't demand. It simply existed. And that's what made it real. Before we reach the end of this story, I want you to pause for a second. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever questioned your worth, if you've ever needed someone to simply stay when everyone else walked away, drop a comment below. Just one word. Anything that reflects what you felt or what you're feeling right now. Because sometimes being heard starts with being seen. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the room in soft gold, Armin looked at Meher differently, not as someone who saved him, but as someone who never needed to, because she didn't fix him. She reminded him that he was never broken beyond repair, and in doing that, she gave him something far more powerful than love. She gave him belief. And for Meher, for the first time in her life, someone stayed too. Not because she asked them to, but because they wanted to. Sometimes, the most powerful kind of love isn't the one that changes everything overnight. It's the one that walks into your broken life, quietly, gently, and loves you like you were worth everything, even when you couldn't see it yourself. If this story touched your heart in any way, don't just scroll past it. Like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like this aren't just meant to be heard. They're meant to be felt, because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting for a reason to believe again. And maybe, just maybe, that reason could be you.